ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the November 21st meeting of the City of Summit Zoning Board of Adjustment. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I am not Steve Spur, who would normally be there. He is not going to be here for most of the meeting tonight. I am Joe Steiner. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Summit Zoning Board. And in accordance with the New Jersey Statute 10:4-10, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to a newspaper of record and has been posted here in the City of Summit City Hall. This meeting is a judicial procedure, and any questions or comments must be limited to the issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum and that is appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. The first item of business that we have to take care of is, some of you know that Chris Nicola was our board secretary for a number of years, and we are pleased that he's accepted a promotion here at City Hall, and we now have Stephanie Sicola as our new secretary, and we need a motion to, did I blow the name again?
Yeah.
Tell me right.
It's Sulios.
Sulios, I even a hyphen, anyway. We need a motion to appoint her as our secretary.
So moved.
Second. And that's just for the remainder of the year.
Right, because that will happen again every year. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
For the benefit of the interested public, this meeting is being live streamed to the city's YouTube page and also is broadcast on Summit's government channel, Comcast 34, Verizon channel 30, and a transcript of this meeting is being taken using the video and audio. So we need all speakers to utilize one of the microphones in the room. Please note that the fire exits are to my right, your left, and at the back of the room where you entered. The city has a listening system to assist the hearing impaired. If anyone needs hearing assistance, please obtain the system at the dais and return it thereafter. Andy Ball, who is one seat over, is the zoning board's attorney. He will advise the board members on matters of law and is the key interface with the applicant's attorney. Mr. Ball does not vote on the applications. You all met Stephanie, who is our city employee and the zoning board secretary. She works with applicants on preparing their applications, planning our agendas, and keeping our meeting minutes. She also does not vote on applications. Also present is Dipsy Sheath, who is substituting for Chris Dower, the board's engineer. She's seated at the table at our right, the audience is left, and she will be providing input to the board and may ask questions of the applicant and witnesses. The engineer also does not vote on the applications, and I believe we need to swear her in tonight for the application she will be commenting on. Can we do that now?
Absolutely. If you could please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
And please state your name, spell your last name.
Dipti Shet, the last name is spelled S-H-E-T.
And thank you. Briefly, for purposes of the record, can you describe your background and experience?
Sure, no problem. I'm a licensed PE, a professional engineer in New Jersey and the state of Pennsylvania. I've had about 19 years of civil engineering experience, and I have experience with presenting in front of boards in the past.
Thank you.
Our board consists of 7 regular members and up to 4 alternates. All members can participate in the hearings tonight, but a maximum of 7 can vote. Most applications require a simple majority to be approved. Some require 5 affirmative votes to be approved. You'll be told which majority is required before we begin our deliberations. We generally hear the cases in the order that they're listed on the agenda, but that may not happen tonight. Try to have each hearing last no more than 30 minutes, but we do understand that some cases are too complex to be heard within that time frame. Each hearing begins with the applicant or their attorney giving an overview of the application and the variances that are required. We then hear from any expert witnesses the applicant may have to help explain the application and why the variances are needed. The board members may ask questions of the applicant, their attorney, or the expert witnesses. Once the board members and the board professionals have completed their questioning, the public will have an opportunity to ask questions. This is not the time to tell us what you think of the application. This will come a little bit later. Before you ask your questions, please clearly state your name, spell your last name, and provide your address. It's important, again, that our court reporter is able to keep a clear and accurate public record. After all the witnesses have been heard, members of the audience have their second opportunity to speak, and at that time you may express your opinion, positive or negative, about the application. Then the public hearing is closed, and we then enter into executive session where the board members discuss the case and vote. You'll be able to listen to our executive session, but you will normally not be able to participate in it. Most applications are heard and decided on the same evening. If a case requires additional information or testimony that we can't get presented tonight, we'll carry your case to another date, and it will not be decided during this meeting. Krista Anderson, the city's zoning officer, has asked that we remind all applicants that they must carefully read the resolution that documents the zoning board's decision and to pay particular attention to the conditions contained in the resolution. For example, if a landscaping plan is required, you must obtain one and submit it to the city's forester, John Linson. If a grading plan is required, you must have one prepared by a civil engineer and submit 3 copies along with the application fee to the city's engineering department. Failure to satisfy the conditions in a resolution will result in a delay in approving your application, as it will cause extra work for the city zoning staff, and the resolution documenting the board's decision will normally be available 1 month after we decide the case. All right, now we're going to go down the list of the applications as we have them on tonight's agenda and see where we are with this. 31 Woodland Avenue.
Yes.
Are you going to be able to do it in 30 minutes, and you're prepared? And how many witnesses?
I don't think 30 minutes. We have 3 witnesses.
Okay. You may not be first for some reasons.
Okay.
Melissa Spur, I will not be handling that. But can you tell us how many witnesses and if you can do it in 30 minutes?
We'll have
But you have to come forward and use the microphone.
We'll have myself and 2 witnesses. I expect it to take about 30 minutes, no more than 30 minutes.
And number 3 is design build management, and I believe we have a request for a
Good
New
evening,
date.
Mr. Vice Chairman,
Oh.
members of the board. James Weber of Alfonso and Weber. On behalf of the applicant, we are requesting an adjournment. We had a chance to review the administrative comments, including the historic preservation comments. And as a result, the applicant is willing to re-examine. He's already exempt it once, but he's willing to re-examine retaining the existing building. So as a result, that takes some time for him to do that. He's hiring a structural engineer, and they'll report back, and we'll either proceed with the application as presented, or it will be amended.
And I believe the next available date we're looking at is
January 18th?
that acceptable?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Is there and you want this without notice?
Without further notice.
And you're
please.
waiving the time for the board?
We'll waive the time within which the board may act on the application.
Okay. Is there a motion to,
So moved to carry to January 18th?
Second.
I think we can do this on a regular voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so that one is off the situation, and for,
Mr. Vice Chairman, could
Yes.
you inquire if there's any interested public here, and I'm willing to speak with them out in the lobby.
anyone in the interested public, please let Mr. Weber know you're here, and he'll talk to you if there's a reason to do so. Yes, sir.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Okay, because of the certain issues with recusals, we're going to ask. What? You would really like me to go do the roll call?
You know.
Why don't we do that? That's the third time I've forgotten that. So my apologize again, well, why don't you just take over and you do the roll call?
Because I'm not in the seat yet.
Here it is. Okay, can we have the roll call, please?
Sure. Mr. Spar is joining us later on this evening. Mr. Steiner,
Here.
Ms. Newell,
Here.
Mr. Yuko,
Here.
Mr. Mullen is excused this evening. Mr. Malay is also excused this evening. Mr. Loikitz,
Here.
Ms. Toth,
Here.
Ms. Sager,
Here.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Here.
We have a quorum. You may proceed.
Okay, you're,
No, I think you, Mr.
Yes, if there was, we also, on behalf of Turcano Park, the Flanagan application, we have requested a special meeting, thinking that December 22nd, it's already, this board is meeting on Thanksgiving week. And the idea of meeting on Christmas week with our representatives and our people, my wife, there's, to the extent we can move this up, would be appreciated. We've heard from the fire
I believe a
department.
survey was taken of the members, and we do not have a quorum for the date you requested, so we're remaining on December 22nd.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Thank you, everyone.
Apologies to your wife.
Or you
And
can
at
move
this
it.
point, I am recusing myself, so
Anyone else?
Which case are we doing now?
63 Woodland Avenue.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
And for the record, we have a few recusals. We have Mr. Steiner and Mr. Yuko.
Four.
And this is just a C variance, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so just as a matter of procedure, we only have, oh, 5.
We have 5.
I can count. We have
I was
5
gonna
members
say, do we
tonight.
have enough people?
We have a sufficient quorum.
Okay.
You're requesting a C variance, so you would need 3 affirmative votes to approve the application.
Okay, understood. And at this point, am I giving my whole spiel or just an introduction?
Yes, please.
The whole spiel, okay, great.
Yep.
You're
So
welcome.
first, we'll swear you in. If you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And please state your name and spell your last name.
My name is Melissa Spur, S-P-U-R-R, and my address is 63 Woodland Avenue, Summit, New Jersey.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Welcome. Tell us about your project.
Thank you. So, again, my name is Melissa Spur. I am here as the owner of 63 Woodland Avenue. My husband, Stephen, and I purchased our first home just next door at 61 Woodland Avenue back in 2014. And since then, we've welcomed 2 daughters who are now 3 and 6 into our family. We love that home, but we soon realized some modifications would be needed for our family to thrive and grow there, namely a little less bathroom competition in our morning routine. That would be good. We had planned to reconfigure that home originally, and just when we were about to do so, much to our surprise, our neighbor, Margaret Sherman, who had raised her family of 4 next door and had lived there since 1974 with her late husband, Herb, who we loved. She came and knocked on our door and told us she was going to be selling her home. And, we knew this could be a great home for our family to grow into and make our own. So we felt that this chance was just no coincidence, and so we took it. We purchased 63 Woodland Avenue last summer in 2021, and we began working on modern upgrades to this home while trying to maintain its historic charm. We worked very carefully on the interior. We didn't want to expand the footprint of the home. We knew that we'd have to address the exterior, and we just wanted to take our time and ensure that we were doing it right, we weren't rushing it, and we were consulting the proper professionals. So we are really striving here to provide a common sense access to the basement and first floor from the driveway, and to make sensitive and thoughtful improvements to make our backyard space family-friendly and private. So specifically in this application, we are seeking variance relief for lot coverage, building coverage, rear yard setback, and left side yard setback, so that we can provide the safer ingress and egress to the home, and also to construct a ground level patio from where we can observe our small children, hopefully playing on the proposed play set, which they have strongly petitioned for in our home. So we also wanted to confirm, per the engineer's reports and comments, that no steep slopes are affected by these proposed improvements. So as for the professionals who are here with me tonight, our architect is Tom Conway of Rose and Kelly Conway, and because the architectural component of this is so modest, he'll be available to answer any questions, but will not be giving any testimony. But that is really, in his domain, really is the deck and stairway entrance intended to connect the kitchen and the basement to the driveway and this patio. Presenting the majority of the application will be our landscape architect, Howard Roberts of Liquidscapes. Howard will share in greater detail our proposal to connect this deck and stairs to the patio, and how the children's play set fits in, and finally, how landscaping has been planned to tie these elements together, as well as provide privacy and mitigate any potential negative impacts on our neighbors. And lastly, our civil engineer is Peter Corzin, and he'll be here from Corzin Engineering to present testimony regarding the on-site stormwater management and, excuse me, other matters of interest to the board and your professionals and any members of the public. So it's my hope that, my testimony, as well as that of these professionals joining me tonight, will illuminate the two main hardships encumbering the site, namely the lot size. This lot is undersized for its zone, and the lot width is also narrower than what the zoning would otherwise require. I would note also that as part of our renovation, we worked really hard with our architect to limit any expansion of the property. So we have largely left it untouched since 1974, at least of what we know from the exterior, and tried to restore it to kind of its original construction from the outside visual aspect. And what you see here today is really the only modification we're making to the exterior of the home in the small deck, stairs, patio, and the playset. So beyond presentation of our proposed improvements and identifying our hardships, we hope to provide a fair assessment of any potential negative impacts to our neighboring properties or the broader community. It's our opinion that not only will there be no negative impacts, but in a number of aspects, the improvements will accrue a benefit to the surrounding properties through improved on-site stormwater management, safer ingress and egress into the property, and creating a more desirable visual environment. So I'd like to introduce we kind of have a sample
Okay.
board for exhibits.
Any questions from the board? Mrs. Spur?
Okay.
Any
questions?
questions?
Sorry.
Or
The only question I would have, I'm not sure if your consultant's going to raise it, when was the house constructed?
I believe it was 1908.
So a long time ago. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Any questions from the public? Anyone interested in this case?
Comments
That
will be afterwards.
Okay.
As far as exhibits, I was going to introduce, we had not really a photo board so much as a sample of materials board. I might introduce it before our landscape architect begins his testimony.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. Do you want to put it up? Oh, where would you like it?
We can actually do it over there. I think that one's already done.
Thanks. I believe I have to actually physically mark it A1, correct? Okay.
We're on A1.
You're well prepared.
Just trying to make it. Kids in school, lots of Sharpies.
There you go.
So I'd like to enter into testimony this, I'll call it a sample board marked A1, which includes some images of the proposed playset representing the playset color and its intended dimensions. It also contains several computer-generated illustrations of our project. It contains an image representing the proposed timber pergola, as well as images showing the paver material on the lower right. To be clear, we're not building a pool. That is just on the pictures. And another image representing a likeness of the construction of the retaining wall. So we hope you will look favorably upon our application for variance relief. And at this time, I mean, if you have any questions, I know I already, okay. Then I'll hand our presentation over to Howard Roberts of Liquidscapes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And if you could raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And please state your name, spell your last name.
Howard Roberts, R-O-B-E-R-T-S.
Thank you. And can you briefly describe your background, experience, and 3 boards you've appeared before recently?
Sure. My company, Liquid Inc. and Liquidscapes, are certified landscape architects, certified landscape contractors, and certified pool builders of 44 years. Started my company in '78. I have designed and built over 4,000 projects in my career. So I think that's usually where I start and end.
And certified in the state of New Jersey?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And have you appeared before any boards recently? Or
One in Belmead, in Montgomery Township.
any questions from the board, or would you like to accept his credentials?
I'll accept the credentials. Thanks.
Okay.
Go
So
ahead.
is it easier for me to stand by the board to kind of point things out?
Well, if you can use the microphone right there,
Okay.
if you like. Thank you.
So what we're kind of trying to illustrate here initially is the general direction of the property we've taken. And you can see it's a very narrow and deep lot, so very limited space available to the property and his family. So like Melissa had indicated, initially there's a proposed deck and stairwell to receive the first floor in the basement. So we have an egress here coming off the driveway to receive that in a safe manner. And then you're basically stepping over to their primary outdoor patio living space. And half of it is occupied with a pergola. And it's going to be something of this caliber, wood pergola, probably stained, and something that will patina and age and over time. So it's not going to be this beacon, if you will, in the backyard and have really any impact on anybody. But part of it is also just to demonstrate some needed shade when they're dining or lounging in their backyard. The real crux of this project was, as you know, these adjoining properties, they're basically falling in grade from right to left. So there's a tremendous amount of cross pitch coming across these properties. So really that was the initial focus of how to manage that for a family that's looking for some play area and living space on the property. So we have a proposed retaining wall here along the property that basically, and then there's 2 mature maple trees here that we're looking to save and basically move the wall out and around, so we're not affecting the virgin grade of the trees or creating an impact to those trees, which we'd like to keep just as a screen and a buffer and some scale to the project. So, and by putting this wall in, which maximum height is about 2.5 feet vertical, so it's not a structural wall of anything of that nature, it allows us to now relax this grade and level it out a little bit to make it more functional and useful for the family. A big benefit to that also is with the amount of cross pitch on the property, by relaxing the grade, we're slowing down the flow of water. The water can be more absorbed than run off. And that was a big focus of this for this family and having little impact on the neighboring properties. So We also went with dry walls, so we don't have to get into wet footings that, again, least impact on trees. We've got a whole hedgerow here. We did a simulation here, as you see. So here's the pergola, here's the patio, and basically here's the retaining wall here that works its way around the trees, these trees here. And then we've created a semi-evergreen buffer. It might be skip laurels or something of that nature, to create a nice evergreen hedgerow for separation and privacy for both the owner and neighbor. And then, even though it's going to be a beautiful stone wall, dried stacked stone wall, we've kind of faced it down a little bit with some lower vegetation just to soften the impact of the wall, but very much in keeping with the neighborhood, nothing commercial looking, if you will. And we also wanted to kind of show these perspectives so you can get a sense of, though we have a swing set in the backyard that's very low profile, doesn't have the rainbow colors, it's not glaring at you, it's not glaring in any way, and it's got the green canopy, which will disappear in the landscape. We just wanted everybody to know that we've made concessions to soften that view. So, pavers we've chosen are what we call a simulated bluestone. They're concrete, but they look like bluestone. Though I'm a purist and I like to use natural stones, we all know bluestone gets intensely hot to the touch, to the feet. So we wanted to go with a simulated bluestone, which is a concrete product. It kind of looks like bluestone, but it doesn't have the intense nature of getting hot. You know, the goal here was to create enough adequate sunlight. There are a couple trees that are being removed that I'll present to John Linson. I've known John for 30, 40 years. And he may feel right away that the initial plantings we're proposing might be a fair exchange. If it's not a fair exchange, then he can tell us, you know, what he thinks needs to be replaced to make up for a couple trees we're looking to take out. But we're looking to take them out also to get decent sun in here so the turf can thrive. So again, by relaxing the grade, we're also minimizing erosion and washout, which is also, we want a functional turf area that'll be wear tolerant for the kids to play on. There's going to be, you know, landscape lighting and other landscaping, but really the crux of this is the backyard was really to relax the grade, and that had to be done with retaining walls. To make it functional, it'll allow for more absorption of water into the ground, into the vegetation, and running off. And when you start to see what they proposed with stormwater, there's an extensive amount of stormwater management taken under consideration here to really improve the condition greatly for everybody involved, not just the homeowner, everybody involved. So, questions?
Any questions from the board? Any questions?
No questions.
No questions, thank you.
Any questions from the interested public or the landscape designer? Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
I guess Mr. Corzine? You know, Mrs. Spur, I forgot to ask you one question. Did you chat with the neighbors regarding your project?
Yes, we did. On Friday, we actually extended an invitation to all of our immediate neighbors behind and next to us and across the street to join us on Saturday for cider and donuts and to discuss any questions they had. We had the plans available. We had two neighbors respond with positive comments. One came to visit. The other has passed by and sent us an email. And our immediate neighbor next door poses some questions by email as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
No.
If you could raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And please state your name, spell your last name.
Peter Corzine, spelled Korzen.
Thank you, and I believe you've appeared before us a number of times.
Yes.
Any changes to your credentials since the last time you were approved before the board?
No, they're all current and active.
All right, any questions from the board, or would you like to accept them once again?
Go right ahead.
So you've heard a lot from Mr. Roberts about the proposed improvements. I'm not going to spend too much time with those, but I just want to go over the existing conditions, which are shown on the boundary and topographic survey in your packet. You can see the property here is undersized, as you've heard. It includes the 2.5-story house, a covered porch in the front, a walkway in the front, a small deck in the back, and a small patio. In addition, there's a detached garage and a driveway with access to Woodland Avenue. The slopes, as you've heard, tend downward in a northerly right to left direction. And there is currently no stormwater management on site, so all of the drainage is uncontrolled. The next plan up is the lock grading and soil erosion control plan. This shows the proposed improvements in detail. You can see that there is a patio in back of the house that's proposed. Half of it is covered by a pergola. There's also a landing just to the south of that has stairs that lead up to a proposed deck, which has access to a kitchen inside the house. That landing also has a flight of stairs that go down to a new landing underneath the deck that has access to a mudroom in the basement. In addition, there is the play set area that's proposed in the back of the property, and there's a proposed walk reconstruction in the front of the house. Grading is the same as it is now as far as the direction. It's right to left or northerly in a downward direction. The only thing is we have relaxed the grade so it's more usable in the backyard. So as a result, the left side or the northerly side is higher than the existing condition. And that's why that retaining wall is required. It's only, for the most part, it's about 1 to 1.5 feet with a maximum height of 2.5 feet at one point. It does run along the northerly property line and then veer away, and it runs along the south side of those two trees you heard about, just to the north of the patio. As far as drainage goes, as I mentioned, the existing site is uncontrolled, so all of that runoff flows downward. In contrast, this includes a substantial stormwater management system that is comprised of a underground chamber system, which is 3 chambers as shown here, a series of pipes, 1 inlet, and a swale on the north side of the patio. So all of that combines to capture a portion of the existing roof, which has a downspout located just at the west side of the swale. That sheet flows down towards an inlet. The runoff from the patio sheet flows towards the inlet. Everything else gets captured by the inlet. There's a small area drain in the downstairs landing that also gets picked up. And the total sum of all those is 796 square feet. Now that exceeds the net increase in proposed impervious surface by 80%. The net change is 440 square feet, so it exceeds it by 80%. So we're providing more stormwater management than what is required. And as a result, as you've heard by Mr. Roberts, that improves not only the condition on the subject property, but the lot and lots to the north and to the left. You've heard about the variances. They're indicated in the zoning data table on the upper right, with the exception of one that was pointed out by Krista Anderson, and that's included on page 2 of her review letter. That is not shown on the plan, but it will be included on a revised plan, and that has to do with the side yard setback to the patio at the back left corner. And I believe it's 10.2 feet proposed. I'm sorry, 10.8 feet proposed where 12 feet is required. So that concludes my direct testimony. I'm open for questions at this time.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
Okay, I'm going to betray my total lack of engineering knowledge. The drainage system is all in front of the play area, part of the lawn, and my understanding is that that is the portion that is going to be smoothed, as you say,
Well,
so
actually,
that it,
The entire rear yard
Okay.
and back of the house is
Okay.
going to be regraded.
So that area of the lawn will be somehow pointing, will slope down towards those drains? Is that the plan? Or where does the rain that's going to hit the play area go?
Okay, the play area is not picked up by the stormwater management system. It's
Okay.
not impervious surface.
Okay,
It'll get absorbed. It's a 2% slope, a very flat slope in the
Okay.
play area. So that gets absorbed into the ground surface.
so we don't have to worry about the water hitting doing something to the retaining wall?
No,
Okay,
absolutely not.
okay.
No.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay,
Two quick questions.
perfect, thanks.
Regarding the building coverage variance, what's triggering that? I think you talked about the total impervious, but it's the pergola, I guess, and the staircase?
Yeah, we've gone up from 1,945 square feet to 2,140 square feet. So if you look just to the left of the plan, you'll see a lot coverage breakdown there. The house, of course, hasn't changed. You get to the pergola itself, that's 181 square feet. So really, that's the bulk of it right there, the pergola, yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that for the record. Thank you. With regard to the patio side yard variance, there's practical difficulties with the width of the lot. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Because of that, and you're trying to line that up with the existing house.
Right.
From that purpose. And then also there's landscaping to offset the impacts.
Right.
Is that what's being proposed?
Yes,
Okay.
from my understanding is there's actually a series of evergreen trees that are proposed just to the west of those two mature trees right there. Yes.
But the pergola is not a solid roof, correct? It's got open beam, like, it's an
It
open
is,
beam
But-
structure,
Yeah, but per definition, it has to be included in building.
but it does allow rain come through it, and it hits an impermeable patio below it.
Right, but that also gets conveyed to the stormwater management system.
Are those numbers being double counted?
As far as stormwater management?
No, FAR.
Not if,
No.
FAR, no, it's not FAR.
impervious underneath, and then the pergola would be
So it's
building
lot
on
coverage,
top.
it's being counted towards lot coverage. So we're not hitting these numbers because of the pergola, we're hitting these numbers because of the patio.
There's two different variances. There's total impervious coverage, which includes buildings, patios, and driveways. And there's a building coverage variance. So that building coverage takes into account these structural elements.
They're
Okay,
not doubled
but
up
not the
because
pa-
they're
but not the patio.
over each other.
I gotcha.
They're in the same.
So not being
Space.
double
Right.
counted.
Correct.
Absolutely.
All right.
Good question. Do you have any
I
questions?
have a couple of questions.
Wonderful.
First, the site plan or the grading plan you're showing, what is the date of the
Oh, yeah,
plan?
uh,
Just to,
Forgot to mention
Clarify
that. It's last revised September 20th, 2022.
okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to state for the record that our review letter, that the engineering review letter is based on the original plans from, I think, July 26, 2022, but we don't see anything that could alter our review letter comments. So we just wanted to put that out there. And the other question is, can you clarify the impervious coverage, which was, I think you mentioned 796 square feet? We just want to make sure that the stormwater calcs are based off of the correct impervious increase.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this was included in the plans that you reviewed, but on sheet 3, there's a detail for the underground chamber system.
We have that, yes.
Okay, and you'll see the stormwater management calculations associated with that. And you could see the proposed net increase is 440 square feet, and right below that is the actual tributary surface that goes to the stormwater management system. It should read 796 square feet.
Okay.
So that's the 80% more than what's required for city regulations.
May I follow up her first question? Because if you were making the comments based on a prior plan, were the plans changed in response to the engineer's letter, and if so, how?
Give me a minute and I'll see if I can find the letter that went along with that. Unfortunately, I do not have a transmittal letter that I can see. I don't recall exactly what the change was. I'd actually have to compare the plan that you have with what I have.
And actually, I think we have to mark that, because we have July 26th.
You have no
And
revision
no.
date at all?
I have September 20th.
Should be right above the title.
9/20/22.
Oh, sorry, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, not the original, the revision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Need our plan? Is that what you're looking for?
Do you have the old plans? can take
I
a-
have the, yeah, give me one.
In the meantime, is there any questions from the public or? Oh, you have to come up,
to the
sorry.
microphone.
Hi, Miriam Zahn, 65 Woodland. I'm the downhill neighbor, one of the downhill neighbors. Just the 796 square feet, is that, and then your chambers are based on 3 inches of runoff? Just, I haven't seen any of the stormwater calculations, I was just wondering. Okay, that's it.
Okay, so one thing off the bat I can see is that the old plans did not include this portion of the roof, which you can see with dashed lines. That's the roughly about 250 square feet from what I remember. And that goes to the stormwater management system that wasn't originally proposed. And yeah, we had a tributary area to the system of 537 square feet at that time, and that's been bumped up to 796. So the chamber system became slightly larger because of that, and as I mentioned before, it's 80% more than what's required per code. That's one thing I can see. The playground area was not correctly graded on this older plan, so that it still maintained the strong slope right to left. So that was revised so we could have a nice flat normal 2% slope. That was an error on my part. As a result, the wall, which was stopped right here on the original plans, had to extend over this way. But in that section, the wall is only 1.5 feet high max. It's actually only 1 feet high max in that area. But it is required just because we flattened out that slope. And I think that's probably it. As far as changes go.
Any other questions?
I don't have any further.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions from the interested public? Comments too? Well, at this point, we can do comments.
And I'll just have to swear you in.
Yep.
To raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes,
And please state your name, spell your last name.
Miriam Zahn, Z-A-H-N.
Thank you.
So first of all, I want to say I'm excited for the Spurs. I think they've done a great job, renovating the house between the two of us. I think we've given our block a facelift, which I know a lot of the neighbors appreciate. And, we're looking forward to them having a fabulous backyard that is usable for everybody in their family. I am appreciative of their commitment to manage not only the runoff from the new work, but also some of the existing, what is called uncontrolled runoff. As you all know, as part of the zoning board, there is a lot of uncontrolled runoff in Summit from, development that sort of grandfathered in, right? Long driveways before there was stormwater management rules and all of that. So We happen to live at 65 Woodland in one of the houses that manages a lot of that runoff. So I just have some comments for the record. One, as I said, our house is downhill. In addition to 63 Woodland, there are 10 other homes that discharge runoff to our property. These 11 properties drain to a low point in our backyard, which is drained right now by a private drain that we own and maintain. Two, we believe that there should be no de minimis exemption for any properties that contribute additional runoff that may make it to our property. I mention this because there was a de minimis exemption given to another property uphill. I know the Spurs aren't looking for de minimis exemption here, but any increase in runoff to our backyard is a burden to our drain. And this is evidenced by a backup that actually happened during a storm surge last year, in this past year. So I say all of that just for the lead up that this looks great. I am appreciative of the stormwater management. However, I think it's important to note that we were in a similar situation 2 years ago, meeting the board here asking for a variance, and we had to put in a stormwater management system. In our backyard, which is parallel to theirs, we found clay, marsh, and a high groundwater table. We know that on our property line that abuts our adjoining property line, there is actually a groundwater seep where just randomly water percolates up, and so we had to manage that so that we could not flood our driveway. And my point in saying that is that if this doesn't work, this, you have to have, for a recharge basin, it has to, the bottom of it has to be 2 feet above the groundwater table, so that there's actually a place for the water to percolate, right? So if it just so happens that their backyard conditions, which are pretty close to our backyard, are similar, and that recharge basin doesn't work there, we're just asking that rather than just giving an exemption, I don't know if that's something the zoning board does, but that there is still a requirement that this stormwater be managed if, this construction takes place in the backyard. And I'm fully supportive of it. I just don't want, any impacts to our yard, or additional impacts, I should say.
Thank you. And we always put in a management of stormwater for 2 years.
Yeah, so one of our usual conditions, and Ms. Spur, if you could come up to the microphone, because I'll ask you to confirm your acceptance here. One of the usual conditions with these types of applications is acceptance of the board's jurisdiction over stormwater issues for a period of 2 years after the application. So, to that point, if there are any concerns, if there are any issues with construction that causes problems and it doesn't work out as intended, you come back before the board, propose new plans, and the board would have to approve those. Is that acceptable as a condition of this application?
Yes, that's acceptable.
Great.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And Mrs. Wan, your house is beautiful, so it's a nice addition to Woodland Avenue as well. So thank you for coming up. Conditions.
So I have two. First is compliance with those conditions noted in the board engineer's memorandum. And second, as we just discussed, is that the board will retain stormwater jurisdiction for a period of 2 years.
Okay. Who would like to start?
I'll start.
Thanks, Pat.
I can certainly be in favor of this application. I believe that the hardships are real. Undersized lot is very narrow, and you can see on the site plan the driveway is incredibly long. So obviously, that unduly burdens the lot coverage, and everything that they're asking for seems entirely reasonable to me. It looks like a great addition to the backyard. It's going to improve the quality of the overall property. So with that, I can certainly be in favor of this.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, I can also support this. I think that the applicant has worked with her professionals very carefully to minimize any effect, any increase of the footprint, particularly of the house. The proposed outdoor additions are minimal, and although the pergola contributes to building, It's not a building the way we think of it. I think that the stormwater management system will benefit not just the homeowner, but the downhill neighbors. And if there's a problem, we'll fix it. But all in all, I think that there are, as Mr. Leukitz noted, there are some real hardships here, and the result of this plan benefits not just the applicant, but the neighborhood.
Thank you. I agree. I think the consideration given to the stormwater management was fantastic, and because you living in the area, you know what the conditions are. So taking extra precautions to add additional stormwater management, I think that would do the whole neighborhood well, and I would approve as well. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Awesome.
Ms. Newell?
Yes.
Mr. Leukitz?
Yes.
Ms. Toth?
Yes.
Ms. Sager?
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Awesome. Thank you. Good luck with your project. Hey, Tom.
Have you unrecused, de-recused? What have you done?
I didn't take roll, so who knows? Are we still on, or are we on a break?
We're on.
Unshun, reshun.
Are we charging ahead?
I assume so.
Liz, are we in session, or are we on a break, or what?
No, we're in session. Would
Oh,
you like a
okay.
break?
No,
I
that's,
just-
We don't
I
need a break
I
after
just
what?
had one.
Waiting for you to come back.
I just had one. What happened all, where'd all this come from?
That was me, because I left my packet. I'm sorry.
Okay, so 63. Okay, let's move ahead then to 31 Woodland Ave, and there you are. You're ahead of me.
Here I am.
Please.
Okay, good evening. Hillary Alls from Dempsey, Dempsey and Sheehan, representing the applicant, the rector, wardens, and vestrymen of Calvary Church in Summit, New Jersey, also known as Calvary Episcopal Church, with regard to property located at 31 Woodland Avenue, Block 1905, Lot 1 in the ORC zone. Citizens come and go, but institutions establish an ongoing foundation that support the core of every community they serve. Calvary Episcopal Church is one of those institutions, which, as one of Summit's centenarians, has been addressing the needs of this community since 1854 and at its present location since 1894. The applicant seeks variance relief to permit the rental of designated church space by third-party users in a way that provides flexibility for the church, but can also be circumscribed by reasonable conditions. The uses that are the subject of this application are uses that have been conducted at this church and other houses of worship in Summit for time immemorial. The church is an inherently beneficial use, and although the third-party uses at the church themselves are not inherently beneficial, they provide the means by which the church is able to provide programs and services that benefit the community as a whole and in furtherance of its mission. An available space that is particularly suited to these types of uses in combination with on-site parking and an abundance of public parking either adjacent to or in close proximity of the subject property. The presentation this evening will begin with Tom Barr, the treasurer of the church, Matt Potter, the parish administrator, and John Barry to provide testimony as an expert in the field of professional planning. I would ask the board if there are any questions of me at this time, and if not, I would ask the first witness to be called and sworn for testimony.
All right, before I let you move ahead, Ms. Toth is recused herself. Anyone else? Or the rest of us are all here? Okay, just so that that's on the record. Any questions for the attorney?
Okay.
No questions for the attorney? Let's move on.
Okay.
Anyone from the public have a question for the attorney? Okay. And there is one member of the interested public here.
Sorry.
All right, if you could please raise your right hand.
Just working on that.
Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And please state your name, spell your last name.
Thomas Barr, B-A-R-R, and I'm at 6 Linden Place in Summit.
And not an expert witness, right?
No.
Thank you.
Okay. Is the rector, wardens, and vestryman of Calvary Church the owner of the property located at 31 Woodland Avenue?
Yes.
And what is your relationship with the church?
I'm the treasurer of the Calvary Church, a member of the executive committee.
And are you authorized to speak on behalf of the church?
Yes, I am authorized to speak on behalf of the church.
And can you please explain the purpose of this application?
Yes. The church seeks approval from the board to allow rental of designated spaces in our church to third-party commercial and instructional use providers in exchange for reasonable rental fees. And these fees will in part fund our community services and programs to further our mission.
And can you explain to the board the mission of the church?
Yes, I think we could talk for a long time here on the mission, but to be quick about it, we are a welcoming and safe place for all. We provide spiritual, religious, formation, pastoral care, social events, private fellowship, interaction. We have barbecues, we have picnics, we have concerts, we have recitals, and all of these, all Summit residents are invited and many do attend. And we do many community programs and benefits.
And does the church in its mission inherently promote the general welfare, in your opinion?
Yes, it does.
And can you describe for the board some of the community services and programs the church provides, which are funded in part by the rental income generated through the lease space?
Yes. Some of the community services and benefits take place both in our church and by supporting outside groups. For example, we have small cooking providers that need a small commercial kitchen, such as SHIP, which is Summit Helping Its People, and this is a program that we partner with this organization. They come in, they provide a hot breakfast to homeless or near homeless, and every morning, really early, and then they give them a sack lunch that they take away, so we've taken care of their breakfast and their lunch. We provide the facilities. We have an excellent small commercial kitchen. And they have a designated refrigerator that we provide. That's this huge commercial refrigerator. So that's a program every day, Monday through Saturday. I think it's a great organization. We provide services such as this. Also many other little things, Women's AA, Drug Addicts Anonymous, Summit Warm Hearts, which used to be also called Code Blue. It allows homeless to have a warm place to sleep. Family Promise is another organization that we work with. The Calvary's hosted families that are really in need, and we put them up for 2 weeks, give them shelter at a time. We work with other churches, and they'll take time, we take time, for example. And then we also provide financial support to groups such as Grace, the Food Bank, Bridges, Sage, other things like that. So, trying to be quick about it, but we do many things.
Thank you. And over the past few years, has the church experienced a decline in its congregation and attendance?
Yes, as have many other Protestant churches. We've had a decline, so we've had less attendance, less, congregation has gone down, and our pledges have gone down also. And then the pandemic, that hurt, so a lot of our income has gone down, but our expenses have seemed to stay up. So we're funding that shortfall through programs like this and dipping into our savings.
And are you the best representative of the church to describe and explain to the board the past uses, existing uses, and general contemplated uses the church provides space for?
I would say no. Our best person is Matt Potter. He's the parish administrator. He has the most knowledge because he deals with many of these groups directly and make sure he knows when they're coming, when they're going, that sort of thing. So Matt Potter, our parish administrator, really kind of keeps his finger on the pulse here.
Excellent. I have no further questions of this witness.
Questions from the professionals? Okay, any questions? Yes. No?
I'm sorry, I don't have any.
Okay.
I was going to wait for Mr. Potter.
Okay.
That's
Any
the crux of the questions.
questions from the board?
Can you describe exactly what would be prohibiting you at this point from hosting these groups? Is it a city regulation, or is it?
No, I think hosting the groups, we could do that. However, in order to do that, we need financial support, which comes from pledges and that sort of thing. We hire people to.
No, I meant these commercial groups to come in. I mean, what you're seeking,
yeah.
why are we here? Why do
yes.
you need our permission to
Okay.
have
If I can
these?
just
Yeah, I think
interject, I
this-
think that question will be answered in the next
Okay.
witness's testimony.
That's fine.
Yes.
Okay, other questions
Believe me, there's a
from the
reason.
board? Do you charge or receive compensation from the nonprofit groups that currently use your space?
Generally, no. Like, for example, AA, we don't charge them, but occasionally they'll, make a donation or something, every $20 or something, but no, we don't.
But there's no rental agreement if some group
No,
wanted
no,
to
we do
come
not have
and
any rental
and
agreement.
utilize the kitchen or utilize any of the other facilities. It's just a matter of a choice of the board if they say yes or no.
Correct, yes. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Any other questions from the board? Okay.
I would ask
Any
if-
questions from the public? Nope. Okay.
if Matt Potter could be sworn for testimony.
All right, if you could please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And please state your name, spell your last name.
Matt Potter, Potter. My address is 15 Herban Lane in Mendham, New Jersey.
Okay. What position do you hold with the church?
I am the parish administrator.
And in your capacity as the parish administrator, do you possess the requisite knowledge of the past, current, and potential uses of the church space for community purposes?
Yes.
Can you, in general terms, describe for the board the historic uses by the church of its space offered for use by the community?
So over the course of 10 years of being employed as parish administrator and even preceding my time at the church, it's always been the case that the church has been used by a variety of groups for community-related activities for which the user has paid a rental fee.
And can you give the board examples of third-party users of church space going as far back as 2016 or as far back as you can go?
Yes. So probably the easiest way is to sort of break it down into types of use. So the first one would be what you might call community-sponsored uses, which is what you might associate with churches. Those are customary and incidental uses hosted by houses of worship. Things like 12-step groups. We have a Narcotics Anonymous. We've hosted AA. We've partnered with the Junior League for their winter coat and jacket sale and also for their Christmas market. There's one-off uses as well, and that includes things like musical recitals, concerts, everything from Masterworks Chorus or the New Jersey Youth Chorus coming in and using the space for a concert, all the way down to a local woman who's holds piano recitals once a year in the church. And then we have instructional uses, and for most of our for-profit, the small for-profit organizations that we rent to, they would fall under that category of instructional uses. And we have groups like Elite Fencers that we've rented to in the past, that's fencing instructions. Brownie Points, the store in town, has held baking lessons. There's arts and music classes for toddlers. We also have small-scale commercial uses, and the main one I can think of there recently is Anita's Baked Wonders. So they used our kitchen for a couple of years. They made empanadas. They did not have a storefront or anything like that, but they used our kitchen to make empanadas that they sold elsewhere. And the last one is rental of parking spaces. So we'll talk about that in a moment, but we have an agreement with Keller Williams where they use space in our lot each day for their agents.
And based on personal knowledge, are you aware of similar uses of church space in other houses of worship in Summit?
Yes, it's common for churches to rent space to third-party users, either non-profit or for-profit. Churches will rent space to community-based uses that are customary accessory uses, as well as to small for-profit uses. And again, they tend to be instructional in nature. I do want to stress that nobody's running, an insurance agency out of a church or anything like that. I mean, some examples that I know of in town, the Methodist Church, they have dance classes, which I believe the board approved the use of that. CPC, the Presbyterian Church, they host a group called Barclay, which is ballroom dancing for children, and Hometown TV. So those are a couple of uses that I know about in the town.
Excellent. And then using the floor plans, which if we can mark as Exhibit A1, which would be Calvary Episcopal Church Parish House, first floor, and Exhibit A2, Calvary Episcopal Church Parish House, second floor. Do you want them on the
I think so. Inspector Gadget arms.
Yeah. You can just... So using the floor plans marked as Exhibit A1 and A2, can you describe for the board the existing uses, making reference to the day and time of the use, the location within the church, the number of participants, and the parking demand created by each use?
Yes, so I'm going to go down the list of our existing renters who use the space. This doesn't include one-off or occasional renters. These are people using space consistently on a weekly basis. I want to preface this by saying that I think in our original application we made reference to a group called Elite Fencers. They're not going to be listed here because they've left the space in the time it took to come before you. So just to go down the list, the first group, Narcotics Anonymous, which I've already mentioned, they meet Mondays at 7 p.m. That's typically 15 to 20 people. And most of those people, they drive and they park in our lot. And the space rented here is the reception room on the first floor of our parish house, which is this space here. Second group is Concord Singers, which is a ladies' choir. They're also Mondays, 7 p.m., 20 to 25 people. Again, most of them drive and park. And the space they rent is not represented here. This is the parish house. We also have the church building is a separate building, and they meet in the church. Third group is the writers' circle. They classes, instruction for writing, adults and children. They're currently meeting Tuesdays 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. That's an adults group. Wednesdays from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. That's also an adult group. And Saturdays 11:30 to 1 p.m. That's a children's group. Their numbers can be anywhere up to 10. And typically how that impacts parking. The children's groups, the children will be dropped off and picked up afterwards. There's no impact on parking there. And the adults typically will drive and park. We also have a group called Patricia's Arts and Music. That's classes for toddlers, acting lessons, music lessons. Mondays from 4 to 5 p.m. Tuesdays from 10 to 11 a.m. Wednesdays 10 a.m. to 12 noon. Fridays 11 a.m. to 12 noon. That's up to a dozen people. Most of those drive and park. The adults and guardians, not the toddlers. And the space that they use is also the reception room on the first floor of the parish house, which is this space. And I'm sorry, I neglected to say the writers' circle, which I just mentioned. They meet on the second floor of the parish house. We have the Art of Living. They're a meditation group. It's a small group, about half a dozen people. They meet on Sundays at 5 p.m. And again, they drive and they park. They also, like the Concord Singers, they meet in the church. And then the final group is Keller Williams. And Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. We have an agreement with them where their agents can use our lot. And typically there will be between 10 and 20 cars parked in the lot. And I think that's our existing renters. We have Passion for Spices as well, which we'll talk about in a second.
Sure. And do you know if any of the participants of these uses are Summit residents?
Yes, I would say a majority of them are either Summit residents or from surrounding towns like Chatham, New Providence. Again, these are typically small, instructional in nature. They're not events that people would travel a long distance to.
And do any of the uses coincide with each other?
Yes.
And can you tell the board what are the contemplated uses the church would lease space for?
It's a little difficult to be all that specific because the uses are constantly changing, and that depends on as groups come and go. And that's the reason why our request is more general in nature rather than specific to one user, in order to allow some flexibility for now and in the future. In general terms, future rentals will be similar to what I've described already, with instructional, small instructional usage, small scale commercial uses perhaps, and again, those that are customary and incidental community-based uses for houses of worship. So typically, what historically has been present at the site and also in other houses of worship in Summit. The spaces used will be the same as I've described here, first and second floor of the parish house, as well as the church building itself. There may be some overlap on groups, but there wouldn't be any overlap with church services or church-sponsored programs. We do have a policy where we don't rent, for example, on a Sunday morning. And the hours of use would, again, it depends on the use and the availability of the space.
Excellent. And since the church has been providing leased community space in the past, and other houses of worship provide similar rental use of their community space, why is it that the church is before the board tonight?
Well, we have rented without issue for as long as I've been at the church, but one of our third-party users, Passion for Spices, who use our kitchen, they were cited by the Department of Health because they didn't have a required food license. And in that citation, Passion for Spices was further cited for requiring zoning approval to use the space. So we consulted with our attorneys and with the zoning officer, and we determined that a general approval would be better than having a piecemeal approval each time we rented space to a third party. The idea being that the board would set standards and control the process with reasonable conditions as we move forward.
Excellent. And are you familiar with the operations and usage of the church space by Passion for Spice? And have you discussed this with the owner of Passion for Spice?
Yes.
Can you describe for the board, including the days and times of operation, the types of events and classes, and how many people attended the events and classes, and what space is rented for that use?
Yeah, so first of all, Passion for Spices is it's a hands-on cooking classes. That's what they focus on, healthy foods from different cultures with a kind of emphasis on socialization. So they will hold cooking classes, and people will come in. They will. The idea is to cook together, learn about new cultures, bond together, that kind of thing. I do want to preface this by saying that we have had an agreement with a contract with Passion for Spices, which is expired. So what I'm about to say is likely to be renegotiated depending on approval from the board and any conditions you might have. But just for context, they've had an agreement in the past year to rent the kitchen and the parish hall and the dining area, which is just outside. I'll just note it on the map here. So we have the kitchen here, the parish hall, and this little dining area outside. The spaces that they've reserved, I'm just going to go through this very quickly. Sunday and Monday from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. Tuesday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Wednesday from 12 noon to 8 p.m. Thursday from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Friday from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. And Saturday from 2:30 to 8 p.m. Now, I haven't done the math, but I think that's about 40 hours. And I did want to emphasize that they are not using the space for all that time. Essentially, what Passion for Spices does is it has reserved those times and those spaces, and then goes away, advertises classes, creates classes, and if they get people signing up for the classes, then they go ahead. In reality, generally speaking, they wouldn't be in the space for more than probably 10 hours a week, I would guess. And also these times include the times that would come in to prepare for the classes ahead of time, and also for cleanup afterwards. And just to, because I say cooking classes, which is a little bit vague, just to be clear on what we're talking about, there's maybe 4 main types of events that they're holding. One is after school for children, which is certain weekdays, say on a Wednesday from 3 to 5. There's after school cooking. That's generally 5 to 10 participants. The children, they'll be dropped off and picked up afterwards. Adult classes, which is a similar thing, typically couples or small groups. Those are held in the evenings after 5 p.m. Again, 5 to 10 participants, with most people driving and parking. They also hold team building events, so maybe a small team within an organization can come and cook together, and it's a sort of a bonding exercise. That'll be generally afternoons, evenings after 5 p.m., an average of 8 to 10 people, and those people drive and park. And then the final is specialty classes. So things like Valentine's Day, there may be a special class where a group would come in and bake or cook something on a Valentine's Day theme. Specialty would also include things like the occasional private party. And that can be up to 20 participants. If it's a children's event, then again, they'll be dropped off and picked up. And if it's adults, they'll drive and park.
And has Passion for Spices obtained the required license by the Board of Health?
No. The Board of Health will not issue a license until the zoning approval has been obtained.
And is Passion for Spice currently using church space?
No, they've suspended their use in our space pending the outcome of this hearing and also a renegotiation of the lease.
And it was noted in the zoning officer's review that the Passion for Spices website was not consistent with the application. If the variance is granted by the board, does the church agree to a condition that the Passion for Spice website would be updated to be consistent with the board's decision?
Yes, and that can be part of the renegotiated lease terms.
And based on your experience with past and current uses, are you aware of the manner in which each use creates a demand for off-street parking or employs drop-off and pickup of students?
Yes, and I previously went through the uses, so rather than going over those again. In general terms, if a class is geared towards children, there's a drop-off and pickup situation. So we have a driveway up on DeForest Avenue. Typically, they can drive up, and they can drive up essentially right next to the door, and children can get out and go in. If it's a class geared towards adults, then generally, unless they're living within walking distance, they're driving and they're parking in our lot. But none of these usage surcharge the parking lot during religious services or any event that the church is holding, church-sponsored community program. Bless you.
Can you tell the board if there's any public parking in close proximity to the church?
Yes, there is. There's a number of public parking lots in the immediate area, including one right across the street. There's an adjacent city employee parking lot right next to our own, and that can be used during the weekday after 6 and on the weekends without a permit. There's also on-street parking.
And have you conducted a survey of the parking areas at the church property?
Yes.
Based on that survey, can you tell the board the number of spaces currently provided on the site?
Yeah, so I performed a physical inspection. So I went outside and counted the spaces. There's currently 47 standard spaces and 2 handicap spaces.
There was some discrepancy in the administrative comments with regard to the number of off-street parking spaces on the site. Can you explain that for the board?
Yeah, so the previously approved site plan sheet that we provided as part of the application actually made reference to 43 standard spaces and 4 handicap spaces existing on the site in 2018. That's not accurate, or at least not now. As I say, I physically inspected the site, and there's 47 functioning spaces and 2 handicap spaces. And this will change slightly soon. In 2018, the church received a site plan approval for, among other things, redesign and reallocation of off-street parking. So that approval was for 41 standard spaces and 5 handicap spaces. That's not gone ahead yet because of economic factors, but we're actually been in the process over the last 6 months of raising funds for that, so we anticipate moving forward in the spring.
Excellent. And based on your survey of the parking areas, can you provide an analysis of the capacity for off-street parking and anticipated demand based on historical experience?
Yes, so to break it down, as I mentioned, there's 49 spaces in the lot, 47 functioning and 2 handicap. We have a small staff. Church employees use up to 3 spaces, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Keller Williams uses an average of 10 to 20 spaces, again 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. So that leaves a predictable total of 26 to 36 spaces, Monday to Friday, before 5 p.m., and all spaces, all 49 spaces, after 5 p.m. during the week, and on weekends, outside of our own religious services and sponsored events. And again, there is public parking across the street and adjacent.
There are also 3 additional buildings on the property. Can you explain to the board what these buildings are used for and if they create any parking demand?
Yeah, so one of those is the rectory, where obviously the rector lives. That has its own 2-car garage and also 2 dedicated private spots in front of that garage. The assistant rector's residence, which has a 1-car garage and again a single private parking space. And then the other building, the 3rd building, contains 2 apartments. We have our organist lives in one of those apartments and our sexton lives in the other. And they have dedicated private parking as well, so not in the lot.
And has there been any issues with parking at the church with regard to the existing third-party users of the community space rented by the church?
No, and that wasn't an issue raised by the Board of Health. We haven't had any issues with the city with regard to parking, and no complaints or quibbles with the neighbors regarding parking or traffic.
Is there any signage proposed in connection with this request?
No.
Are there any changes proposed to the interior or exterior of any buildings on the property in connection with this request?
No.
And is the church prepared to be bound by conditions of approval crafted as a result of reflections and discussions among the planners and the board?
Yes.
I have nothing further for the witness.
Excuse me. You're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you have any of your recent adjustments written down that you can give to the board? The reason why I say that is that the Appendix A is slightly different than what you just testified to. I was trying to make good notes, but of course there's a lot to cover. And I understand there's a lot of different uses and it overlaps each other. I was just wondering if that's something you could submit to the board, just so we have that.
But would we, is that actually an issue for us? Are we going to start to dedicate hours of how many people can be at one? And remember that this variance travels with the land, not with the tenant, not with the occupant. The church moves and there's a new church that comes in. They maintain the same issues. So I don't think it matters. It's what the schedule is today, because it can change tomorrow. They've proven that in the fact that they have a current tenant that no longer has a tenancy.
Understood. I was trying to drive at what is the maximum number of people do they see needing parking on site? And he testified to the times of operation and when they overlap and when they don't
Well, then
overlap.
maybe the question is,
And I
what
just
would be the
thought-
maximum number of people you would see occupying
That was
this
my next
this
question.
space
Thank you.
in the church for these kinds of activities, whether it's at the same, if an AA group is meeting at the same time, any other group may be meeting, a class being taught, a dance being done, fencing lesson happening. What's your maximum that you would allow?
And non-worship time. Is
Right.
what I wanted to point that out. So, thank you. Do you know what that might be?
So for a maximum usage, I think a lot of it would depend on, a lot of it would be bounded by space. I mean, currently probably the day we're getting most use is Monday, today. So as I mentioned previously, we have Narcotics Anonymous, which might have up to 20 people, Concord Singers, which may have up to 25. So that's close to 50 people.
But much less than the 26 to 36 spaces that you indicated would be available after you take.
That's right, and again, these are in the evening. These are in the evenings
Okay.
as well, so that will be all 49 spaces would be available. And theoretically, we may rent to other groups on a Monday evening. However, the space available, we have a couple of meeting rooms that might, could contain perhaps a dozen people. So ultimately, it's not like we have a lot of space that could fit hundreds of people. We already have one group, the Concord Singers, which is in the church, which is the largest space that we have. So really, that's something that I consider as I rent people in, and how much space we have available and whether groups will be bumping into each other. It's a kind of a common sense decision.
I'm sure that's exactly why we're here tonight. Just wanted to make sure that's being obviously managed correctly in order to understand what the overall demand is on the on-site parking, but understanding that you do have some off-site parking as well as municipal parking in close proximity. That's important. That peak period you see is more after 5 o'clock, right? That's after your employees have left.
That's right, yeah. So community groups who would typically work during the day, that's when they would come in.
As well as Keller Williams is also in the property.
Yes, has gone by then, gone by 5 p.m., yes.
Okay. And your counting of the parking spaces, and that was different than what we actually had as the exhibit, is 49 parking spaces with 2 handicap.
Yeah, that's what I counted, yes.
And that's where I believe the engineer may have a question on the number of handicap, because I think we saw more than that on site. Just wanted to point that out for the record, just so that that's clear as far as where we are. Sorry, I was trying to take notes as you were going. touched on all. The one question I had relates back to, I think the treasurer was pointing out, you have the shift program. What times of day does that occur and how many people use the kitchen? Did I pronounce it correctly?
SHIP, yes, Summit Helping Its People. So that's very early in the morning. So we're talking 6 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. Yeah, and those patrons, I know we have had up to 20 people coming in. Those patrons will, I mean, they're homeless, they will walk to the church. They will sit in the parish hall. They will have a hot breakfast, and then they leave with lunch.
My point being, any of the employees are not there.
Absolutely, yeah, that's very early in the morning, that's right.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Do you have anything?
Yeah, regarding the spaces, the 41 standard spaces and the 5 handicap spaces, I think you mentioned that you have not gone forward with proceeding with the 5 handicap spaces, is that correct?
Right, not yet, no.
Okay. What is the reasoning behind that?
I mean, to be frank, ran out of money.
Okay.
We had a lot of capital campaign. We had a capital campaign. We did some improvements, and that was the parking lot is the final thing to be completed.
Okay.
I mentioned before, we have over the last 6 months made a concerted effort to raise money.
Okay.
For that, we've raised over 100,000 over the last 6 months, and we anticipate moving forward with that in the spring.
So currently you have 2 handicap spaces near where the trash is located, per the site plan, and the remaining 3 will be in the lot area, is that correct?
Quite honestly, I'm not certain, because I know there's been some discussion, and some discussion with legal teams as well about where those spaces need to be.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that's been fully decided yet.
Okay.
But those were part of the application that was accepted prior.
Yeah, this was.
So the city is monitoring that.
Yeah.
And in fact, the city has a considerable amount of our money in escrow until that has been completed. So we are very much motivated to complete it, so that will be done.
Questions from the board?
I have a couple. I first want to compliment both the witness and the counsel. Very thorough lines of questioning, very thorough answers, answered almost all my questions. A couple of questions, though. So I think I know the answer, so just to be sure. Any of the renters you're talking to or considering, they're all a few hours here or there. None of them will be full-time users of the space?
No, and in fact, the limitations of the space really would prohibit that anyway. We've had, I mentioned before, Anita's Baked Wonders were in the space. Some of you may know them. They sell empanadas at the farmers market. They started out a few hours a week. They expanded to a couple of days, and then they simply outgrew the space. They said, we can't continue to operate here, and they went and they got their own space. Same thing with Elite Fencers as well. They needed more time, they needed more space than we could provide, so they moved out. So, and the church doesn't really have any interest in having a real heavyweight commercial entity in the building. That's not what we're very cognizant of our duty to the community and to allowing the space to be available for many different uses.
And you listed a lot of possibilities, a lot of possible uses. Will any of them overlap? And I assume if they do overlap, you've considered the combined impact of 2 activities at the same time, or will there be any overlap?
There may be from time to time, but again, it's the limitations of the space are such that I wouldn't consider that to be, the space would be overflowing. That's just a case, again, of common sense of just managing. And obviously they will not be overlapping in the same spaces, so I don't anticipate that being really any more than it currently is.
Okay, that's all I had. I had other questions, but it was all covered, so thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Please.
I still would like to understand a little bit better about this whole health code thing. Did the health department, did you speak with somebody at the health department? And is this requirement of a zoning approval, is that part of their ordinance? Is this something that is that everyone who cooks commercially or teaches cooking commercially is subject to? Or are you, as the landlord, are there expectations of you in some way from the perspective of the health department? Was there a specific violation?
There wasn't a violation, so the way I understand it, and I wasn't there through the whole process, but the health inspector visits, I think every year or every 2 years, I'm not sure how often, but the health inspector comes in because we use the kitchen for ship and also for our own uses sometimes. So the health inspector comes in, and during a health inspector visit, he noticed that this group, Passion for Spices, was using the space. And he told both them and us, this tenant cannot operate without a food license. They need to go to City Hall and get a food license. And my understanding is that then the proprietor went to City Hall, and City Hall essentially said, you can't get a food license because the church is not zoned for this kind of activity. So it became this kind of this situation where she couldn't get a food license because it wasn't zoned, and then so that's why we ended up coming.
Does SHIP have a food license, or do?
The church itself has a food license.
I
yeah.
see, okay,
Yeah.
I understand now. Okay.
So we could, so any organisation using our kitchen can go to City Hall and apply for a food license, and then it's up to the zoning officer whether they get a food license. Now, clearly, SHIP is considered a group that, although it's separate from the church, is considered part of the church's outreach.
Right.
So they can get a food license. A third-party group coming in, Passion for Spices.
It's not under your umbrella?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is.
But Anita's had one, so because you had Anita's and Brownie Points and other places.
Anita's did have one, yes.
Okay.
And then just to clarify from the zoning perspective, the reason they need the variance is because rental of the space for commercial uses is not explicitly listed as an accessory use in that zone.
Okay.
So that's kind of why they're
Understood.
stuck before us tonight.
Gotcha.
So if we're all organizations, nonprofits operating under the church's umbrella, we would not be here tonight. Is that correct?
Say that again?
If they're all organizations like SHIP, which are nonprofits operating under the church's community outreach, if that was all the uses, none of them were commercial tenants, we would not be here.
I think they would have a better argument that that would be customary or incidental to a church, so likely that's correct.
But the church is renting to some commercial
Commercial, correct,
entities
yes.
as a fundraising.
Right.
Is this variance? And it's just that we have to deal with the food
Sure.
portion of this,
Understood.
where right now, probably, if somebody went for a license for one of the other profit-making things, they'd probably get the same reject. But not for the food purpose, but because it's not commercially allowed.
So I have a question about that. So are we giving a variance for the food-specific third-party businesses, or is it a variance for commercial uses that require licenses? For instance, I've just been thinking about yoga studios. So similar idea, except it's not food, it's, I'm assuming health, but if they wanted to lease out that space, similar times, doing classes for kids, would this cover that?
Well, I think the issue is that's, if I'm honest, I think that's open to interpretation. I mean, one group, for example, that I would reference is we have a meditation group coming in. Now, I had a discussion with the zoning officer a few months ago, and I suggested, well, this is a meditation group, they are non-profit, you know, surely they could meet here. And her response was, well, it's not technically an accessory use of the church. It has to be something directly connected with the church. Now, having spoken to our lawyer's office, they would quibble with that, and they would probably argue that. But it does seem like there's this grey area, even with non-profits, even with groups that are spiritual-based, if they're not explicitly connected with the church, that seems to be technically, potentially an issue.
So I think the purpose or the request is more for a generalized variance, and in the planner's testimony, he will go through the different categories of uses that the church is requesting to be allowed to rent space.
Did either you or your attorney talk to the Board of Health in relation to this application? Because on our report, it says that they had no comment. If they had no comment, this would have been their time to say something.
This was the Department of Health out of Westfield.
That's what we're talking about.
Right.
That's where we send it.
I have, I
So
guess.
you've had no, the
There was
city of
no
Summit
comments, right.
obtains its health department services from Westfield.
Right.
So you're talking to the same thing, whether you're talking over to City Hall or you're here in this building or in Westfield. Has anyone talked to them on this application?
I have not.
No, I mean, my assumption would be that if the zoning,
So I
was
guess
changed,
we
then
could,
they would.
we could take the position that they had the opportunity to review this application in its entirety and chose not to object.
Well, they actually physically had no comments. Isn't this their report here, REHS?
Yes.
Yes,
It
they-
says no comment, well, you
No,
know,
I mean, an actual report. Isn't this their report here?
no, it says no, it actually says no comment.
Isn't that them?
So they've actually sent us a piece of paper that says they have no comment.
That is
I was,
correct.
I was using the cover sheet, sorry. Which factors into our decision, I think, in some ways. Because they're the ones who brought you here, and yet they have no comment on why you're here. Have I got that right? Okay. Any other questions? Any questions from the public? None?
I would ask the next witness be sworn, please.
All right, if you could please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, yes.
And please state your name, spell your last name.
John Barry, B-A-R-R-E-E.
Thank you, and you're being sworn as a planner tonight?
Yes.
Briefly describe your background, experience, and 3 boards you've appeared before recently.
Sure. I have a Master's of City and Regional Planning degree from Rutgers University. I'm a principal with the firm Higher Gruhl and Associates in Red Bank, New Jersey. I've been a licensed planner and a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners since 2014. I've had the pleasure of appearing before your board a couple of times, most recently through our Zoom windows. And more recently, I've been qualified in Metuchen, Flemington, and Glassboro, were the last 3 boards I appeared before.
Thank you. Any questions, or would you like to accept
No,
this
let's
credential?
accept your credentials and move on.
Thank you.
Can you explain the steps that you've taken to prepare yourself to give expert testimony in this matter?
Sure. I reviewed the application materials that were submitted to the board, met with the other witnesses that you've seen this evening and our attorney here to discuss the thrust of the application and the background of the church and what's been taking place. I visited the property and took a walk around both the site and the surrounding areas. And I prepared an outline and a planning report to guide the testimony this evening.
I would submit Mr. Barry has qualified as an expert to give testimony as a professional planner and has an adequate foundation upon which to project his expertise. And based on your review of the application, reports, site inspection, and all of the relevant materials, have you prepared a planning report and testimony in connection with this matter?
Yes, I have.
And can you please provide the board with a presentation of that report?
Sure. So as we've heard, the applicants before you this evening seeking use variance relief, D1 variance relief under the statute, to permit a somewhat open-ended group of accessory uses to be conducted at the church property. We heard the nature of what's been taking place at the church, and I think the applicants submitted that the proposed uses would fall generally within those categories. I'll run through those in the context of your development review ordinance to try and put them into some boxes that hopefully we can work with moving forward. As you heard, the uses really fall into 2 categories. Those that would be customarily incidental to the church's mission, even if they're third-party groups, they tend to be things that are in the community-based realm, things that fit in with what the church does as its main activity, things like the SHIP, the Narcotics Anonymous, and so forth. And then you have the commercial uses where you have third-party enterprises that are profit-making enterprises that are leasing space. The property itself, we haven't talked too much about the specifics, but it's a 2.8 acre property, corner of Woodland Avenue and DeForest. I'm sure you're familiar with it in general. There's the two main church buildings that were described, the church itself and the parish house. Those are toward the corner of DeForest and Woodland. Then you have the two detached single-family homes a little further up Woodland as you move toward the school and the apartment building. Those are the rector and assistant rector's dwellings. And then there's another attached structure that contains the two apartments that were referenced, and that's behind the neighboring businesses on DeForest. And then the parking lot extends back from there, immediately adjacent to the municipal Maple Street lot that, as was already mentioned, has permit parking for employees in the city during the day, but then becomes open and available parking in the evenings and on weekends. Across DeForest, just to the south, we've got the three DeForest Avenue parking lots, also municipal lots that have a initial hour of parking for free, and then you can park for up to 5 hours at $1 an hour before it jumps up, because they don't want people using them as commuter lots, presumably. But there's available parking at different times of day for pay, and then it becomes free in the evenings and on Sundays. The property's in the ORC zone, which is an office residential character zone in the city's ordinance. The purpose is described as to allow for the conversion of existing residential structures for office uses while preserving the historic character, scale, and features of the building and the streetscape. Permits a variety of commercial uses that are in the office realm, and it conditionally permits houses of worship. So the church itself is a conditionally permitted use. And what we're talking about here in terms of keeping the scale and the character of the building and allowing for a mix of different commercial uses is fairly well consistent with what the zone describes. The zone also includes a design requirement that states that all uses shall maintain the character and architecture of existing structures. In this case, certainly no alterations are proposed to allow for these different uses. The church building is intended to remain as it is. As to the D1 analysis, we have to satisfy both positive and negative criteria. In general, and to the suitability of the property, in general, the application is beneficial in that it supports the church's mission. We heard discussion that the church itself is an inherently beneficial use. These ancillary activities are not necessarily under that umbrella, but by helping support the church, they do further the benefits that are inherent to the church. We also heard discussion about how the church itself has seen its congregation shrink. That's a trend writ large. I've done some recent research on this for another community. For the first time, according to a Gallup poll in 2020, the first time since they've begun conducting this kind of research, the membership of adults in the United States who are members of churches has declined below 50%. So roughly 47% of adults describe themselves as affiliated with a church or a religious group. So there's been a broader trend, not just here at this property, of churches needing to find other activities to help pay the bills, essentially. Broadly, the church also provides for kind of a niche and incubator space for some of these small businesses or some of these groups that may not have access to commercial space elsewhere, may not be able or willing to enter into the kinds of long-term leases that you would traditionally need to have at a retail storefront or a strip mall or something like that. It fills a void in the market in certain ways. As to the site itself, we've got an existing structure with its own parking lot. It's been a staple of the community for well over a century. Close proximity to downtown and other parking resources that offer a lot of parking, frankly, at the off hours when the church, most of these uses are taking place. The church itself, it sees its activity peak on Sunday mornings. You've heard the testimony that all of these other activities will fill in those times around that. There will be no overlap with the church's prime time. So the site, as it sits vacant and limited use during most of the week, some of these activities can help bring a little activity to the property at those times. The building, as I said, be retained, no alterations to the property other than the anticipated improvements that were previously approved by the city. So it certainly sits within the historical character and its existing conditions. As to the special reasons under the positive criteria, advancing purposes of zoning, Purpose A talks about promoting the public health, safety, morals, and welfare. Continuing to support the church's mission certainly falls within that category. The programs, both the for-profit and nonprofit entities, offer community benefits that are able to take place because the church offers a venue. Purpose G is to provide space and appropriate locations for a variety of commercial uses. As I said, a lot of these uses with the limited hours, flexible hours that they seek likely wouldn't be able to sustain a full-time commercial space, so the flexible space and flexible hours offered by the church facility are a benefit in that sense. And as you heard, the space is naturally limiting in that once these businesses become successful enough to grow, they need to find bigger and better space that they can control themselves, as you heard with the example of Elite Fencing and the empanada maker. Purpose J, promote the conservation of historic sites and districts. The property is in the North Side Historic District, and it will remain as it is, and certainly not, none of these changes will harm the integrity of the property or that district. The other relief we're looking for, before I get into the negative criteria, has to do with parking. There's an existing deficiency in parking per the city code on site today. The proposed uses will not coincide with the peak hours associated with that use, but nevertheless, we are seeking a variance for parking. And as stated, there's a certain number of spaces on site that fluctuate in their availability. We have testimony on the record about that. And I would put forth that there is ample parking at the municipal lots to satisfy any overflow need, particularly during the evenings and on weekends when the neighboring lot on Maple becomes available to non-permit holders. As to the negative criteria, the application can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good. All of these uses we're talking about relatively minor in impact and in scale, taking place within an existing developed site that's not going to change in any appreciable way. There'll be no exterior indication of new activity, no changes to signage, no changes to lighting. The neighboring properties, particularly along DeForest, are commercial in nature, so not impacting any residential neighbors with any of this activity. And then the application be granted without impairment of the zoning ordinance and master plan. The church is a conditionally permitted use in the zone. The ORC zone does permit limited commercial activity, and the 2016 reexamination report calls for maintaining and encouraging an effective transition between commercial and residential zones, which I think we're talking about here in very specific detail, protecting existing sites of historic value and encouraging adaptive reuse of historic property, which is again taking place, and maintaining the prevailing character of the city's neighborhoods. Maintaining by allowing the church to continue to function and prosper, it certainly maintains this important site within the city. So, in conclusion, the proposed uses are generally compatible with the existing church buildings, the parking lot, the neighbors, and I would put forward that the uses that are described as existing uses and what the church anticipates in the future would consist of instructional uses, things like the cooking schools, art school, writing school, and so forth. Commercial uses that don't include a retail component. Commercial kitchen use without a retail component and without a restaurant use. So nothing that's going to have people coming to the site outside of a designated specific time. You know, the church does not want to have the unpredictability that goes along with retail. They want scheduled things with a limited and clear number of participants. Theater uses as defined by the ordinance, but limited to live performance, and then community-based uses, which would really fall most likely under the more customary and incidental uses to the house of worship. So the flexibility that we're seeking helps the church sustain its mission, advances the purposes of zoning. The site has proven suitable for these uses in the past and will continue to do so in the future. there's naturally limiting factors associated with the use of the church space that would keep things from becoming a problem that would be detrimental to the neighbors and to the city as a whole. So I would put forward that the application meets the statutory criteria and would ask that the board approve the application.
Recognizing that this is an application that seeks a generalized approval for uses that have had historical antecedents and future uncertainty, are there any conditions that could be imposed on an approval that addresses the general nature of the application?
Sure. So I think, firstly, as I said, the proposed buckets of uses, I think the church would be pleased to have the instructional uses, the commercial uses without a retail component, the commercial kitchen use, theater use, and the community-based uses as the set of uses that would be permitted as accessory uses to the church. We could discuss and explore conditions related to parking management that would put the burden on the church to make sure that parking is properly allocated on site, and that also the board could retain jurisdiction over parking for a period of time to be determined, so that there could be proof of concept that that parking management is being done properly to the board and the city's satisfaction. Certainly a condition that any third-party user would be required to obtain any and all licenses or permits from any other city departments aside from zoning, so the health department or any other regulatory body. And certainly a condition that anything would be subordinate to the principal use, and the main principal use of the property would remain the house of worship.
And in those buckets that you were describing, would that also include the Keller Williams type rental of space for parking?
Yes, and also the rental of parking space as part of that approved parking management plan.
I don't have anything further.
Any questions from the professionals?
Yes, just a few quick clarifications. I appreciate your testimony. You definitely went through all the necessary requirements under the statutory criteria. You had addressed the uses as if they were accessory, but I do like your last phrase, which is they're subordinate uses to the principal use. We're really not classifying these as accessory uses because they rise almost to principal uses in the zone. So I appreciate that. So wouldn't you agree? I think they're better called subordinate uses than accessory uses.
Yeah, certainly the third-party commercial operators we can think of as subordinate, limited in scope, but not necessarily accessory.
Okay. Also, you had what was identified during the cross-examination is that you're going to have the Keller Williams use on the property. That's a maximum of 20 spaces, correct?
That's my understanding. I would, if you need any further clarification on lease terms, yeah, I would.
You can look at that.
Yeah.
As to a condition, if that was to be something you saw as favorable. And then your understanding is that the existing garage parking that's available for the rectory and all other uses will be maintained into the future. And it's understood that that's going to be the case in this application.
That's my understanding, yes.
Interesting to hear your statistics on church membership and its decline. That's something we've been looking at as well. You can see it definitely changing whenever you see in the future.
Mm-hmm. These are big properties with a lot of potential implications, that's for sure.
Thank you. No further questions.
Questions from the board? None from this side, none from that side? Okay, and the church is willing to stipulate to the conditions that,
Yes.
okay. He's your consultant, he's not you. I thought I'd ask the question. Okay. No other questions? Okay, back to you.
Okay, so I have a brief summation, and then
Please.
that would be it for...
Just briefly,
Yeah,
did we
sure.
open the planner to questions from the
Oh,
public?
I'm sorry. Any questions for the planner, from the public? Nope.
Okay. The proofs presented tonight demonstrate both the positive and negative criteria required for the variances requested by the applicant. The applicant's planner has described in detail for the board the purposes of zoning that are advanced by the application, specifically the general welfare, the provision of appropriate locations for a variety of commercial uses, and the conservation of historic sites and districts. The proofs demonstrated that the church property and the unique space that is provided within this historic church buildings are particularly suited and peculiarly fitted to the use categories proposed. The church, which is centrally located in Summit with a combination of on-site parking as well as public parking adjacent to and in close proximity to the site, has frequently available flexible space, which remains relatively passive outside of church services or programs, that provides a variety of spaces not available elsewhere in the market for small businesses or instructional schools or organizations to provide their services, start their businesses, or provide meeting spaces for which they would otherwise not be able to afford or sustain on their own. Because many of these uses have limited hours and small-scale space requirements, the space provided by the church allows for more flexible terms than may be traditionally available and fills an important niche that is not readily available, while also maintaining the character of the area and relationship to the neighboring properties. The same purposes of zoning as previously stated are demonstrated in regard to the off-street parking variance, together with the fact that the demand created by the uses at any given time can be satisfied with on-site parking in combination with the public parking adjacent to and in close proximity of the subject property. The proposal will not be a substantial detriment to the public good as it maintains the existing character of the neighborhood. The uses have been historically provided on site with no parking or circulation issues, and the uses proposed will have no effect on surrounding properties. Finally, the proposal is not inconsistent with or will not substantially impair the zoning ordinance or master plan. In fact, the proposal advances several purposes of zoning, as previously stated, while also reinforcing many goals and objectives of the 2000 master plan and subsequent re-examination reports as specifically detailed by the applicant's planner. It is submitted that the applicant has demonstrated the proofs necessary to permit the church to lease designated church space to certain categories of uses as described in the presentation, to provide flexibility that indirectly supports and furthers the mission of the church, and which can be effectively managed by reasonable conditions, such as those offered by the applicant and their planner, and any conditions that result from the reflections and discussions of this board.
Okay, thank you. This is the time for the public to make any comments that they would like to make, so anybody from the general public, now is the time. Okay, well, you've already testified. Okay, then we will look for conditions.
And I will need some input because we have a few possibilities proposed, but just want to make sure we narrow that down. I have a number already. First is compliance with those conditions in the board engineer's memorandum. Second is that the applicant will work with...
I'm sorry, the engineers?
Yeah, the engineer's letter.
Okay.
That's a standard condition that we have.
Okay.
Any issues? Or?
On
No, I just
all
didn't see
app-
anything in the engineer's report, that's why.
We have I thought we had one, right?
There is a letter, yes.
Yeah, yep. Okay. Second condition is that the applicant will work with Passion for Spice to update its website to reflect the correct hours of use of the church.
I might say that my thought there would be that any and all tenants shall have their websites and and posted hours of operations, advertised or whatever, in compliance with the church.
Okay.
I don't care who it is, I think they all should be the same.
And
That
it's
can
just-
be worked into the...
Yeah, it will just be limited because obviously we can only bind the church to what
But
it can do, but it
we
will
can't
work
buy,
with
and
any
we can't buy
tenants.
Passion for Spices because they don't have a lease.
Sure. But any
Or-
the applicant will work with its tenants to ensure their websites reflect the correct hours.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Maybe that's a requirement of the lease between the church and the...
And whomever they may have.
Third is the uses by other parties will be limited to scheduled commercial uses with a limited number of participants, including instructional uses, commercial use without retail component, commercial kitchen use, theater use, community-based uses, and rental of parking spaces. Fourth is that the rental of the property will be subordinate to the main use of the property as a house of worship. And we had a couple possibilities that were proposed but not discussed in any detail. First is the potential for parking limitations. Does the board want to see a set limited number or some sort of condition based around limiting the number of parking spaces?
I also heard an offer of retaining jurisdiction over parking, so.
That was on my list as
Okay.
well.
Personally, I think leaving it where it is right now would make sense, and retaining jurisdiction for 2 years. And we have a parking services agency that can give us lots of data down the road.
I mean, I think we've actually had kind of this, kind of on a trial basis, they've been kind of operating this way anyway. We're not formalizing what they've been doing, and it does seem like parking's been a problem. But I like the idea of retaining jurisdiction, just in case.
So, council, any objection to retaining parking jurisdiction for 2 years?
No, that's fine.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
And then the last one was, as I mentioned, setting a number as a parking limitation or some guideline based around that. Do we want to consider a condition based on that?
No.
No?
Hearing a resounding no,
Okay.
I will remove that from my list.
Okay, who would, yes?
Mr. Chairman, before the board deliberates, Mr. Ball, should we be mentioning the fact that the prior approval for the site plan approval, parking area and the 5 handicap spaces is still, it's still in effect and not affected by this application?
Yes, as a matter of law, that is the case. I don't think we necessarily need to make that a condition of this application.
I just want to make sure I was on the record.
Okay.
Okay. Who wants to kick it off?
I can.
Go ahead.
I mean, it seems almost, well, I understand why we have to go through this exercise, that there needs to be a review from time to time of what the church is doing and who it is doing its business with, and it's probably a good, healthy exercise. And to be sure that all of your subordinate associates who are spending time and doing business inside the walls are doing it with the proper licenses and credentials. It doesn't seem, there hasn't really been any complaints about parking. Your peak parking is on Sundays, and all of this other stuff that happens is, outside of that time in the evenings, during the weekdays. So that doesn't really seem to be a problem. The fact that we're going to follow the, with jurisdiction for a couple of years and maybe look at some of the parking data during that time is probably a good thing. I can definitely support the application, and hopefully things all work out with the extra revenue.
Yeah, I can support it as well for all the same reasons. As I think, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, they've really been operating kind of this way for a number of years anyway. Maybe they shouldn't have been, but they were. So I think it's demonstrated that they can function this way, and I think they seem very sensitive to not having multiple renters at the same time with lots of cars. But even if there is a lot of, publicly available parking. And, if they were, 50 feet over, they'd be in the district anyway, where they'd be part of that parking, the central business district for which for which that parking is for. So I don't anticipate it be any kind of a burden. And I think it's good that we help the church, raise money in a time when they are, having lower attendance and lower collections. I think that's a positive, so I can support it as well.
I think it's also important to note that the folks who brought this to us, namely the Board of Health, didn't have any objection to us doing this, or they would have made a comment to that effect if they were out there, that there was an issue there. I think it makes, the only thing that they couldn't do today is rent out the kitchen. And it might be something that we might want to consider for our annual report when we send this off to, that we're going to talk about a little bit later tonight.
Well, rent out the kitchen to somebody who didn't have a food license.
Right. That they'd have to do that. But if it's not zoned properly, a church wouldn't be able to get a food license even if they could. So it's something we can look at. But it doesn't affect this application, which stands on its own. And I certainly can support it. It meets all the criteria, both of the positives and the negatives. And hopefully we've given you enough to write your resolutions appropriately. Is there a motion to approve this application?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Can we have a roll call?
Sure. Vice Chairman Steiner?
Yes.
Ms. Newell?
Yes.
Mr. Yuko?
Yes.
Mr. Loikitz?
Yes.
Ms. Sager?
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank
Okay.
you.
At this point, we're going to take a 5-minute recess before we do our last piece of open public business, before we then move into executive session. And that will give the opportunity for all the professionals and folks to clear the room so we can, after we approve the minutes, we will then go into executive session, which is for the items that are mentioned on the agenda, the annual report, the calendar for next year, and the discussion of the RFQs. We are recessed for 5 minutes.
Anyway, sorry.
That was
Yeah,
the
Now
most
we're-
well presented.
Now we're back. There's no
Mr.
coaching
Chairman,
involved.
it's your meeting.
Thank you very much. Before we exit into executive session, we have minutes for approval. They're November 7th, Stephanie, right? And we just need a motion and a second, and then I believe we can do that as a voice vote.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Wait, I'm
Aye.
sorry. Who seconded that?
I did.
Scott,
Okay.
Mr. Woodkins. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none? Okay, those are approved. Then I need a motion to enter into executive session.
Moved.
Second.
With no other business to be transacted afterwards.
With no other business to be transacted afterwards. And with that, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Thank you, Andy. Great to see you. And Jay, you can cut the feed and you can
You can go home, Jay.
go home if you'd like as well.